Okay, confirmation bias, last lesson in the unit. Okay, so quick review where we've been. Last lesson we looked at classification systems, we looked at how culture can affect diagnosis, we looked at clinical bias, and now we're going to look at the key study by Rosenhan that I think is pretty good for diagnosing disorders. And again, some people might argue that it's too old, it's not relevant, but I think it's a classic in psychology, and if we're looking at diagnosis of disorders, then we should include this in our unit. And so we're going to look at how Rosenhan's study demonstrates the effects of clinical bias. You could also use Rosenhan's study to look at the importance of classification systems for normality, abnormality, right? How we distinguish and the difficulties in distinguish normality from abnormality. Yeah. This Kahoot recaps this final topic, so you can play that. And then there's a good video here about Rosenhan's research. And then as they're watching, try and be remembering the aims, methods, and results. And we'll go over that at the end. Okay, bit of chalk and talk. I don't know why the order's wrong there, sorry, but we'll talk about the aims, methods, what they did. And another reason why I like the study is it's very easy to remember. Students often like it. Students tend to remember the stories, the studies that have a little bit of a story to them. They remember case studies really well, like SM and HM. Rosenhan study, they tend to remember it well because it kind of seems to have a personal touch. I think anytime there's somewhat of a narrative to a study, students tend to remember it quite well. And so it's something I've been toying with when I'm teaching studies, to try and somehow weave in a narrative in them if I can. But then that runs the risk of students remembering the narrative as opposed to the details. But anyway, sorry, I'm thinking out loud. All right, chalk and talk, the study. And I think this is the key. These are the key details that highlight the role of confirmation bias or clinical bias, as we're looking at confirmation bias as a type of clinical bias. Is that the pseudo patients, so the researchers, they were taking notes on their experiences, and the patients around them were thinking, hey, something's wrong here, and they raised some alarm. In the beginning, the patients were quite secretive about taking the notes, and then afterwards they realized no one cared, so they were just doing it out in the open. But the hospital staff interpreted, as Rosenhan reports, the hospital staff interpreted their note-taking as being consistent with their abnormal behavior, maybe being something symptomatic of their problems. And so they're showing a confirmation bias here, right? That their behavior was interpreted in line with their existing belief that they had something wrong. And so we can see here, and what that might have led to is just strengthening their own views that they already had a psychological disorder. As opposed to maybe if they were more neutral and they're biased and interpret how they interpreted their behavior, they might have asked the questions that the patients were asking. Hey, are you perfectly fine? You seem to be taking notes and doing maybe research for something. Now here's the part of the story that I love and doesn't ever cease to get students into it, where of course when the study came out, and this was pretty alarming for the psychiatric community. So one hospital, Rosenhan accepted the challenge that they said that we can spot pseudo patients. Send pseudo patients to our hospital, we'll spot them. Rosenhan said sure. 3 months, 193 patients went to this hospital to seek treatment, and they proudly declared, the hospital said, look, 41 people of this 193 were judged by at least one person to be a pseudo patient. And what was it? I think there was also a stat there about how many more than one, but at least 41 by at least one. Rosenhan didn't see any. And this kind of strengthens his point again, perhaps. All right. In here, you might want to add some details. What does it mean to be normal, abnormal, and then we can do some chalk and talk about different ways of criteria for normality and abnormality. Now, I would recommend, if you are doing this topic for the exam preparation, then you probably should spend a whole nother lesson on the Rosenhan's criterion for normality and abnormality, statistical normality, social norms, maladaptive, and you'll probably need some more research as well. I think to be best prepared. But again, I would focus on etiologies and treatments when it comes to the exams, which is why I don't have heaps of research into this. Okay, alright, if there's time left over, they can read the lesson and answer the guiding question in their workbooks. This is an extension video. They can watch this at home, or if you've got extra time, if you've got a long lesson, you can watch this about the crash course, psychological disorders. Alright, end of the lesson. Whatever their next big assessment is, their homework would be, go through the workbook, take notes, write notes, and prepare for whatever assessment you're going to give your students next. And voila, that's it. That's the end of the abnormal psychology unit. Hope it was helpful. Hope the resources were helpful, and I hope your students enjoyed it and they got something out of it. Cheers.